When we think of big money heists, we often imagine a large crew of people working perfectly in tandem to pull off a complex scheme where every attention has been paid to the minute details. So how did one man rob 300 million yen without the use of guns or explosives, without violence of any kind, or even any damage of property? He was probably a fraudster sending bogus invoices or something, right? Nope, this was a good old honest face-to-face robbery, and when you hear how he robbed these bank employees, you'll think this is the dumbest robbery in history, but it was actually the perfect crime. In 1968, the branch manager of Nippon Trust Bank in Kokubunji, Tokyo was sorting through his letters when he found one that wasn't quite like the others. Some of it was written by hand, some of it was assembled from magazine pages, which is usually an indicator as to the sentiment of the message and is widely regarded as a bad sign. Sure enough, the message was threatening in nature and demanded a female employee drop off 3 million yen at a designated location. At the time, in 1968, that was worth about $8,500, which is now worth about $75,000. Damn inflation. If the instructions were not followed, the writer of the letter promised to do some inflation of his own. To the bank. With a bomb. Assumedly, the bank manager got confused because he immediately went to the police, something I'm sure the instructions mentioned specifically not to do. 50 police officers were deployed to the drop-off location to wait for the extortionist, but they never showed, so the police concluded the letter was a hoax and investigated no further. Still, the bank informed its employees of the letter and warned them to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. Assumedly, they got confused because they almost instantly did the opposite, but we'll get to that. It was December at the time, and that means bonus season. Companies were requesting large withdrawals of cash to pay their employees bonuses, and the banks were delivering them. One such company was Toshiba, which had asked the bank to deliver 300 million yen to their Fuchu factory. That was about $800,000, which today would be about 7 million. Nippon Trust Bank usually transported money in metal boxes in the trunk of a Nissan Cedric, which would then be occupied by 2 employees. But in light of the recent threatening messages the bank had received, they decided instead to have 4 employees do this rather than 2. Big security upgrade there. At the time in Japan, it was standard to use unarmoured civilian cars for this task because it was believed a generic car would be less likely to be the target of a robbery. And so, at 9:30 AM on the 10th of December 1968, the 4 employees embarked from Nippon Trust Bank on their way to the Toshiba factory, completely without escort. After making their way to Fuchu, where the factory is located, they found themselves driving alongside the walls of Fuchū Prison. Well, no one will rob us here, they thought, and when they saw a motorcycle policeman making his way over to them, they thought, now we're literally unrobbable. But the policeman stopped their car with a frantic message. The bank had exploded. The bank manager's house had exploded. The very car that they were travelling in had exploded. Oh, no, not yet. But the police had good reason to suspect the car was rigged to detonate, and all the bank employees should get out right now. They did so, and the policeman climbed under the car to inspect it. After a moment, smoke and flame began to pour out from underneath the car. The policeman screamed that it was about to blow, and all 4 bank employees made a run for it. The policeman then jumped in the car and drove off. As they watched the heroic policeman put himself in harm's way to get the bomb away safely, they thought, well, we definitely won't be robbed now. They had just been robbed. Yes, it soon became clear the policeman and the money were never coming back, and not because they'd been blown to smithereens. The bank manager's house remained unexploded, thankfully, and so too did the bank itself, sadly. When police arrived at the scene, they were greeted by a mountain of evidence, things the suspect had left behind, like the police motorbike, which turned out to be a civilian motorbike painted white with some crap attached to it, and the safety flare, which had been used underneath the bank car to give the illusion it was about to explode. There were other things left behind too, like clothes, and the police were even able to determine the suspect's blood type from recovered saliva on the postcard for the threatening letter, assuming the two were related, of course. They were able to track down the bank car where it had been abandoned not far away, where it seemed the suspect transferred the money to another car. They also managed to track down this car, which had been previously stolen and then abandoned again to transfer the money to a third car. But that's that's where the trail went cold. They had a lot of evidence, but it turned out much of the recovered items were red herrings and had seemingly been intentionally scattered at the scene to confuse police. A massive investigation began involving 170,000 policemen, the largest investigation in Japanese history. And it made sense, seeing as this was the largest heist in Japanese history. As the investigation went on, the list of suspects grew to 110,000 names, and 6 million fingerprints were analysed for matches. An early suspect was a 19-year-old boy suspected by the police pretty much immediately after the robbery. He was a local who was familiar to the area, was suspected of being part of a robbery gang, and he was the son of a motorcycle policeman. The police arrived at his house for questioning just 5 days after the robbery took place and found him dead. His death was found to be caused by potassium cyanide poisoning. Officially, it was ruled a suicide, and he was considered not guilty. The next year, a 26-year-old taxi driver was identified by a major Japanese newspaper as closely resembling the composite photos made by police. This became widespread knowledge, and although the police had little to no evidence, they arrested the man for a minor, unrelated charge in the hopes of twisting a confession out of him during questioning. But the man had an alibi for the day of the robbery. He was taking an exam, and his presence was monitored. The police let him go, but the media's coverage of him had already destroyed his name and reputation. He fell into bankruptcy, but struggled on for decades until in 2008 he committed suicide. The police were heavily criticised for making an arrest under false pretenses, which was seen as an abuse of power. The stress and scrutiny of this is said to have led to 2 police officers committing suicide during the course of the years-long investigation. By 1975, the statute of limitations for the crime was almost up. In a desperate last attempt, police arrested a friend of the 19-year-old suspect. He was in possession of a large amount of money, but he wasn't saying nothing to them police, and they couldn't prove the money was related to the robbery, and that was that. After 7 years, the investigation came to a close with the passing of the statute of limitations. Not only can the thief no longer be charged for the crime, but as of 1988, they've been relieved of any civil liabilities, meaning they could freely tell their story without fear of legal repercussions. Even still, the thief has never come forward, and we don't know who it was or who they were, as we don't even know if there was more than one person involved. So even though the robbery sounds like it came from a sitcom, it was the perfect crime. At 300 million yen, it remained the largest heist in Japanese history until in 2011, when 600 million yen was stolen from a company in Tachikawa, but the police caught up with them. If you enjoyed this video, I have plenty more in a similar style for you to watch at your leisure. You can watch one with a meal or binge them all in one go, but what you absolutely must make sure you do is subscribe so that you can see a new one every week. Well, until next week, stay safe.